Dear scholars, I'm really happy to be here and have the chance to share the results of my investigation with you today. I'm Elham Barzegar. I'm an MA holder of Teaching English as a Foreign Language, Shiraz Azad University, Shiraz, Iran. I have been teaching English for over 17 years in Iran Language Institute now. I did this research as a part of my thesis project under the supervision of Dr. Ehsan Rasai, whose profound knowledge and nice support was really helpful, and I would like to appreciate him here and now. As you can see, the title of my paper is The Effects of Learning Style and Input Modality on Iranian EFL Learners' Vocabulary Learning. Let's take a look on the introduction of this study. As we can see in recent approaches to teaching language, learners receive more and more attention as active participants in the learning process. The learners have been brought into central focus in learning theory from 1960s. Therefore, taking their mental and psychological abilities into great consideration in hopes that they could achieve greater success is a common practice in education as well as teaching a language. On the other hand, most of English teachers, if not all of them, are looking for the most effective learning theory that can help their students learn better, easier, and faster. One of these theories that interests educators and researchers to a very great extent from 1970s is learning style theory. A common concept here is that individuals differ in the way they learn, according to Cofield and Mosley 2004. The term learning styles speaks to the understanding that every student learns differently. Technically, an individual's learning style refers to the preferred way in which a student absorbs, processes, comprehends, and retains information. Pashler and Doe, 2008, stated that if the learners classified according to their preferred learning style, and if the instruction is designed accordingly, the optimal instructional outcome can be obtained, which is really desirable for teachers, policymakers, and curriculum designers, and each person in the realm of teaching a language. I did this study for several reasons, among which lack of empirical evidence for the hypothesis that providing instruction based on individuals' preferred learning styles alongside with lack of credible learning style-based instruction in teaching vocabulary to Iranian EFL learners, as well as lack of oral presentation of the materials to learners with different learning styles, and lack of experimental research that investigates the role of different input modalities on learners' vocabulary learning are the most crucial ones. The objectives of my study are as follows: finding out whether providing instruction based on the individual's preferred learning styles improves vocabulary learning of Iranian EFL learners, investigating the extent to which learning style preferences, visual and auditory, predict how much an individual learn and retain vocabularies based on two different modes of instruction, textual mode and audio, investigating the effects of learning style on vocabulary knowledge, alongside with investigating the effects of input modalities on vocabulary learning. The research hypothesis. This research has a null hypothesis. Learning style does not significantly affect vocabulary learning by EFL learners. I did this study for several reasons, and it is significant because of that. First of all, raising the teacher's awareness of learning styles and input modalities that can help them make their students more attentive and their learning experience more enjoyable and effective. Furthermore, it can help English teachers at any level and stage who were willing to optimize their instructional outcome, and it can also help adapting and developing of teaching materials that improve L2 vocabulary learning. The research question: does learning style affect vocabulary learning by EFL learners? Let's take a look on the review of the literature. I cover some key components of learning a language and learning a style theory here. Learning styles, the concept of learning style taxonomy, learning style and instruction, vocabulary learning, input modality, and glossy. If we want to talk about learning style, learning styles can be identified, classified, and defined in many different ways. Generally speaking, learning styles are overall patterns that provided direction toward learning and teaching, according to Cornett 1983. Different learning styles affect how learners learn, how teachers teach, and how the two interact. Learning style taxonomy. The review of literature showed that we have almost 71 different learning style models, among which these that are presented here are the most well-known and widely used, such as Cope Learning Styles Model, Honey and Mumford Learning Style Models, and others. When it comes to learning style and instruction, the most common hypothesis about the instruction relevance of learning styles is meshing hypothesis, according to which instruction is best provided in a format that matches the preference of the learners. When it comes to vocabulary learning, we can see vocabulary as the core component of language acquisition as well as L2 learning. Input modality gained an extensive attention, especially in recent years because of the use of multimedia in teaching a language. And we have different kinds of glossing that can help foster language learning. Dawn and Dawn learning style model is the most famous model among all because of its construct and the wide range of assessments it offers. You can use this learning style model for the students as young as, for the children as young as 3 years old through adulthood. Furthermore, this is a clinically tested, award-winning, comprehensive, and a proven approach toward learning. Moreover, more than 850 studies over 33 years were conducted in more than 175 institutions all around the globe on this model, so it has a solid research base. So we use this model as the conceptual framework of this study. This model identified 5 key dimensions on which student learning styles are different from each other: environmental, emotional, sociological, physiological, and psychological. In this study, our central focus is on physiological component, which divides the students into visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning style. You can see the design of the study here. This study has a quasi-experimental design which included pre-test, post-test, and a delayed post-test. At the very beginning of this study, a learning style inventory was administered, on the basis of which all the participants assigned to two learning style groups, visual and auditory. After that, the participants of each learning style group were subdivided into two experimental conditions, textual and audio input. As I mentioned before, the core objective of this study is to investigate the effects of a learning style on vocabulary learning. To serve this purpose, four experimental conditions were created: visual textual, visual audio, auditory textual, and auditory audio. A vocabulary knowledge test was administered to figure out the target vocabularies for this study. Among 20 unfamiliar words, 12 were selected. A reading passage was selected to serve the objectives of this study in treatment session. All the four experimental conditions received the same passage, but through two different input modalities: textual condition and audio condition. In textual condition, all the participants received the text, the passage with L2 clauses right after that, while in audio condition, the instructor read the same passage at the normal rate of speech to the listeners, to the participants, and the L2 clauses immediately after that at the same rate of speech. All the participants in four experimental conditions took a vocabulary knowledge test as a post-test right after the treatment session. 2 weeks later, they took another vocabulary knowledge test as a delayed post-test to examine the effects of learning style on vocabulary retention in a long run. The participants of this study were 83 male students learning English at Iran Language Institute. All of them were enrolled in the level race 4, meaning that they are roughly at the same level of proficiency. They range in age from 11 to 13. They have the average experience of 2 years of learning English at EFL classes. They all learn English as a foreign language. They were from 4 intact classes. The participation was voluntary, and they were informed that they can withdraw at any time for any reason. The initial number of participants were 83, among which 12 were excluded from the sample because after administrating learning style inventory, their test score didn't meet the criteria to be assigned to a specific learning style group. 2 instruments were used in this study. The first one is the SLAG and Norwich 2007 Learning Style Assessment Inventory, which was developed on the basis of Dawn and Dawn Learning Style model. This inventory divides the students into 3 learning styles: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. A pilot study showed that kinesthetic learning style is less dominant, so the statements referred to this learning style were excluded from the inventory. As the learners were different, and because of the testing condition, an adapted and translated version of this inventory was used. This inventory included 12 statements on the 4-point scale from never to always. The reliability of the questionnaire was measured by the researcher through estimating Cronbach alpha. The obtained Cronbach alpha of the questionnaire is 0.79, which is a high and acceptable level of reliability value. The second instrument in this study is Wecsh and Paribakht 1997 Vocabulary Knowledge Test. Two different versions of this test with the same level of difficulty were designed and prepared to serve as a post-test and delayed post-test. They include 12 vocabulary items. As the collected data in this study was numerical, a quantitative data analysis method was used. After the data was collected, SPSS package was used to analyze the data through using one-way ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, independent samples t-test. Two-way ANOVA was used to examine the effects of two independent variables, learning style and input modality, on dependent variable of the study, which is vocabulary learning of the learners. One-way ANOVA was used to place the differences between the groups with different input modalities. Independent samples t-test were used to examine the two independent variables regardless of one another on the dependent variable. The results of the data analysis was shown in these two tables: the descriptive statistics for learners post-test and delayed post-test scores in vocabulary knowledge test, and other information about this study are presented here. Okay, two-way ANOVA was performed on the learners post-test and delayed post-test scores to see if this difference is statistically significant. As we can see in this table, F equals 6.88 and the significance level is 0.11, which means that P is less than 0.5. That means that this difference is statistically different. So the null hypothesis is rejected, which means that learners' vocabulary learning was affected significantly by their learning style preferences. I want to talk about the results of this study, which are supporting done and don'ts ideas about effectiveness of preferred learning style and better learning. The findings are also consistent with other scholars' findings and investigations. The conclusions of this study are these: learners with auditory learning style learn better, learners with auditory learning style benefited more, learning style affect vocabulary learning. The implications of this study are for different groups: teachers, as it can provide them with great insight into their students' strengths and abilities, to the language planners and material developers, because they can provide the teachers with appropriate learning style assessments, and also to the policy makers in adoption and development of some workshops to make the teachers familiar with these different learning styles, which can promote language learning and teaching to a very great extent. I have some suggestions for further studies, like using other testing instruments such as multiple choice tests, conducting studies on the learners of other levels such as advanced levels, conducting some studies on other language skills such as reading, doing other studies regarding to other learning styles such as field dependent and field independent. My study has some limitations, among which lack of control group was the most important one. Thank you for your nice attention. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a good day.